Wisconsin is known as the Badger State.
Let's take a tour of its state capitol building. Madison is the capital of the state of Wisconsin. The city of Madison was built on an isthmus, a narrow strip of land between lakes Mendota and Monona. At the southwest end is Wisconsin's state capitol building.
The centerpiece of Capitol Square, the building is the tallest building by law in Madison. The exterior is Bethel white granite from Vermont. All four sides feature pediments with sculptures.
The interior is just as impressive as the exterior. Inside, you can see Wisconsin's Constitution, the Veterans Memorial, and beautiful artwork. Tours of the building are free to the public.
So my name is Steve. I'm going to be your tour guide. We're going to go to 6 different places today. All right, let's get started. All right, so this is called the rotunda. We like to start here. It's sort of the center of our lives here, kind of what we call the living room of the Capitol. A lot of things go on in this space. As we go to the different locations, I'll be talking about what happens in each space, a little bit about the history, a little bit about the art, the stonework, the architecture. Feel free to ask questions anytime we go through. Now we like to start here because what happens, a lot of different activities in this space. We have concerts, we have speeches, we have our share of protests as well. We have lots of weddings that happen in this space. Anybody in Wisconsin that wants to get married can come in here, free, get married. So one day we had, a couple months ago, we had 3 weddings going on at one time. It's kind of fun because everybody claps at the end after the I do's. Now we also have some permanent displays here. You'll see a bell over there that looks familiar. What bell does that look like?
Liberty.
Okay, in 1950, the U.S. had France make a copy of the Liberty Bell for each state. So that's exactly the same size, shape, and weight as the original one. We like to say that ours in Wisconsin is better. Why do you think we would say that? Partly because we're here, but also because it's not cracked. That's right, not cracked. Oh, right. You see a head right back there. That's Governor Robert La Follette. He was the governor of Wisconsin at the time this building was being planned. Was a strong advocate of open government, and is one of the reasons that our building is really still so open to the public. A lot of people are a little bit surprised about that. Now, as far as the building goes, when you came in the building, you noticed it was white stone on the outside. That's white granite. It comes from Vermont. We are the only state that has a dome made out of granite. Then at the top of the building, did you notice what was at the top of the building on the outside? A statue, a gold statue. Her name is Wisconsin. We're not terribly creative about our women's names here. She's a big lady. She's almost 16 feet tall. She weighs 3 tons. She's made out of solid bronze, but she's covered in gold leaf. So 22.5 karat gold. She faces towards the sunrise. She's got her arm out like this, which represents our state motto, which is forward. And probably the strangest thing about her is that she's got a badger sitting on her head. Well, now how many of you are from Wisconsin? Okay, well, you folks certainly know, and the others probably know too. We're a little bit crazy about our badgers in this state. In fact, if you look up one floor and at the end of the hallway over there, you'll see another badger looking at you. And we got a couple more to go here as we go around. Now, from the top of the badger on the statue's head to the floor where you started the tour, that's 284 feet. That makes us, in terms of comparison to other state capitals, we're the 10th tallest. But we are also 16 feet taller than the national capital. We're proud of that. We are also known for having one of the largest domes by volume in the world. And that means, as you take into consideration the height and the width of the dome, one of the largest in the world. Now coming inside, you see a painting at the top. That's called Wisconsin's Resources. In that painting, there's a woman with red hair. Now pretty much any time you see a woman with red hair in a painting at the Capitol, her name is Wisconsin. In that case, she is actually holding a sheaf of wheat, which some people found a little surprising. But that's because at the time this building was built, Wisconsin was actually known more for wheat production than it was for dairy. But the other women surrounding her are all holding items representing the products and services of the state, like mining, fishing, and so forth. That painting, if I could bring it down and put it right inside this railing behind me, it would just barely fit in there. But up there, it just looks so tiny. It's by Edwin Blashfield is the artist. Now coming down, you see a railing up there above a strip of decorative lion's heads. At that level is the observation deck that some of you, I think, have already been to. And any of you that want to go there at the end of the tour, I will direct you at the end of the tour. Beautiful view. You go walk all the way around the outside of the dome. Beautiful view of Madison. Beautiful view of Madison. Indoor hallway that has some historical displays. You can see a doorway right up there. That's a plexiglass panel where you can look down from there into the rotunda. Four pieces of art that you see in the corners. Those are mosaics. They're done by an artist named Kenyon Cox. Each one is 100,000 tiny squares of glass. 100,000. Three of the four represent the three branches of government. Of course, executive, judicial, legislative. And that's a big deal for us here in Wisconsin because we are one of relatively few states where the leadership for all three branches are still right here in our Capitol building. Many have had to move, oftentimes, their court system to another building for space reasons. All of our legislators also have an office right here in this building. Now the stone. We're known for our colored stone. We have 43 kinds of stone, 30 are marble. So the green that you see all around here is marble from the country of Greece. Above it is a thin reddish strip. That's from Algeria in northern Africa. We have a lot of French and Italian marble. For example, the railing tops are French. The balusters down here, the dark part, Italian. In fact, we have stone from 6 different countries other than our own. I mentioned 4 of them there. Where you started the tour, you were standing next to some kind of sparkly black pillars. That's cyanite stone from Norway. And then the 6th one is marble from Germany that we'll see when we go in the Supreme Court. Now, Wisconsin isn't really known for its stone, but we do have a state stone. Do any of you know what our state stone is? Most people don't. It's red granite, and that's what you see at the opening for each one of these 4 wings here, the reddish columns. That's our own stone. It comes from the Wapaka area. All right, we're going to head back to the governor's conference room. So the flags that you're walking by here, 11 flags for the 11 federally certified Native American tribes of Wisconsin. And come on back to the next badger. Okay, this is our 1,200-pound badger. It was made in 1899 from melted cannons. It was mounted on the front of the USS Wisconsin battleship. At the time of World War I, it was removed from the battleship out of a concern that potentially shrapnel might hit the sailors from incoming shells from enemy fire. At that time, it was put in storage for a while, eventually given to us on loan. Even back throughout its history, it is believed that if you rub the nose, it was good luck. You can see the nose is a little bit shinier and worn than the rest of it. I will let you decide what you want to do with that piece of information. Anyway, be aware that we do have a jar of hand sanitizer in this next room. find that there are some people who don't really want to rub his nose, but they're afraid if they don't that they're going to have bad luck. So this room is called the governor's conference room. The governor's office is through those doors there. He uses this room for important functions. For example, he'll sit at the middle chair there. At the head table, he'll sign bills into law. He'll meet with the news media. That's where he used to do his updates on TV. Uses this room for special receptions for visiting dignitaries. Now, this room is really very different from any other room in the Capitol building. A lot of people say that it looks a little bit like a palace. There's some truth to that because it was actually modeled after a real palace over in Venice, Italy called the Doge's Palace. Have any of you been there? I just had the pleasure of being there last June, and it is amazing. There's one big room that looks exactly like this, different paintings, but the combination of paintings and gold, although that room, of course, is 400 years older and 10 times bigger. But this room features, it really has the most gold of any room in the Capitol building. But then, like the statue on the top, it's gold leaf, so it's like a gold paint over wood or plaster or another surface. It also has the most paintings in one room. The artist is named Hugo Ballin. The 26 paintings in here represent different scenes or events in Wisconsin history. For example, if you look at the ceiling right there, you see a redhead woman. Do I need to tell you her name?
Wisconsin.
That's good. You're a quick learner. This is called Wisconsin and Her Attributes. That's all about the things that make us strong as a state, including showing a woman, for example, with some fruit representing agriculture, an old man with a sextant representing some of the water-based fishing and in navigation on the waterways around Wisconsin. The paintings around the sides, you'll be thankful that I'm not going to tell you in detail about each one, but they're all related to more historical events. So, for example, right over here, this is Chief Redbird talking to Major Whistler. This happened about 1828, and this was basically a peace meeting, sharing a peace pipe to end the Indian Wars that were happening here in Wisconsin at that time. Although it's a little bit bittersweet because that was the time they were very happy to end the wars, but it also was the time when the Native Americans basically handed, by contract, the land over to the Europeans. Well, Americans then. So a little bit more about this room. Notice that this wood, how much wood this room has. The walls are made out of stained cherry wood. The floors, 4 different kinds of wood in parquet floors. Now this is a good place to, kind of leads me into the history also, because there's so much history in this room. I do need to ask first if anybody here is from Michigan. You are? Okay. Close your ears in a minute. All right, so this building was completely opened in 1917. But the history starts back in 1836, and that's when Wisconsin became its own territory. Prior to that time, it was part of the Michigan territory. When we couldn't stand it anymore, we formed our own territory. And at that time, we named a governor, and that's who's over there in the corner, the white statue. That is Governor Henry Dodge. He was the first territorial governor. And we formed a legislature. And that legislature met in the building that's pictured right over there in the last painting there. That was the first temporary capital over in Belmont, Iowa. And when they met, their first decision took 40 hours, and that was where it put the permanent capital of Wisconsin. Very hotly contested item. They eventually decided on Madison, which was a little bit unusual because Madison was not even a city or a town then. But it had recently, just prior to that, it had been platted as what it could look like as a city, meaning they'd drawn it out with property lines and a big square in the middle, which would be a Capitol Square. That's right where you are now. You're on that square. So that's where the first territorial capital was built, right here on this Capitol Square. It was always too small. They quickly needed a bigger one because government was growing so rapidly. We became a state 12 years later. So they built a second Madison Capitol, and that one is pictured right over here. But you are actually in the third Madison Capitol. The second one burned down in 1904. What happened was there was a ceiling, they were varnishing the ceiling, they were using gas lamps to see what they were doing. The ceiling caught on fire. They expected the sprinkler system to kick in, but no water came out. They discovered when they investigated that the day before the fire, a maintenance worker had drained the tank to do some work and not yet refilled it. Now they still didn't panic though, because they thought, wait a minute, we've got 2 huge lakes on each side of us. We got plenty of water to fight this fire. The problem was, it was February. February. Not a good time to get water out of the Madison lakes. Especially, it had been an especially hard winter. So the fire burned for 20 hours. Very little of the building was left. It was not repairable. So they turned around and planned this building, started construction in 1906. It took 11 years to build, and they built it wing by wing. Finishing it in 1917. Original cost was $7.2 million. Of course, that's 1906 dollars. Be a far different sum today. Now, since we did have a fire back in 1904, we've always been a little bit nervous about fires. This room has a lot of wood in it. And we have a huge fireplace down there, which is hand-carved Italian marble. However, it is our understanding that it has never been lit. And we know for sure now that it cannot be lit, because in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a huge restoration of this building in which they refinished furniture, replaced carpeting, fixed up some paintings where they were drying and chipping, and added some systems improvements, one of which was air conditioning. The fireplace is now part of the air conditioning system. Another thing they did during that period was they fixed some areas that had been inappropriately redecorated over the early years. For example, they got rid of all the fluorescent lights here. This room is an example. In the 1960s, one of our governor's wives thought this room was too dark, so she had it painted. The color that you see there is the color that this room was painted, which I officially call ugly beige. Anyway, so that was part of the restoration, was they went in and stripped all that off the walls in here and restained the walls, which is no easy task given all this gold trim you're working around here. One of the advantages of having a lot of stone is that sometimes you run into fossils. So as you come up on the 4th step up, notice the starfish fossil. This is Tennessee limestone that we're walking up here, and we got a genuine fossil there. So anyway, this is the north hearing room. It's a meeting room. What might happen in here, for example, is they might hold a public hearing when they're considering a bill or law change, or invite experts to testify. But originally, this room was the home of the Railroad Commission. That was the body that oversaw all the railroads in Wisconsin. Now, the railroads were taxed at the time this building was built, so a big chunk of this building actually we owe to the railroads. But having the Railroad Commission in here is the reason that if you look at the artwork on the ceiling, all of them deal with different forms of transportation. Horseback canoes, stagecoach in the back, and the one to your upper left is the one that we call modern day. Of course, that's modern day 1917. What do you see right there? A plane. So that now this building was built only 13 years after the Wright brothers flew their first flight. But obviously, you know, there were some planes flying around, and the artist, whose name was Charles Yardley Turner, believed that planes were the wave of the future. So he got them in there, even though it's kind of tiny. Now a little bit more about the room before we leave here. So you notice how it's got a yellow tint to it? What do you think's causing that? Skylight. So the building architect was named George Post. He was a New York architect. He loved natural light in buildings, which is a challenge in rooms like this, where you have no outside windows. So he planned all 4 of the major meeting rooms on the 2nd floor where there was going to be no more building above it, a big skylight in each one. They're basically all works of art, all different colors, different artists and so forth, but bringing that natural light in. The last thing to talk about is the stone in here. This flat stone right here comes from underneath the Mediterranean Sea, which is hinted at by the wave pattern right above it. And then, as we talk about fossils, notice that there. That is called an ammonoid. It's a 400-million-year-old shellfish related to what's still called, that's extinct, but the nautilus still exists. There are about 15 bits and pieces of them in the walls here. That's the most complete and distinct. But lots of fossils. The last thing is the stone on the side. If you notice these side panels, notice how they're actually 4 pieces put together. It's not just one piece. That's Italian marble. And it's a process called double bookmatch marble. And it's a process where they take a piece of marble and they cut it into 4 thin slices and then they open it like a book. So you have a mirror image thing going on side to side and up and down. And until you cut them open, you don't really know what you're going to get. We do have some favorites in here. Right up here, can you see a pug dog? Yeah. Ears, eyes. This one is hotly debated. Some say eagle, some say badger, some say lion, some say triceratops. The fun thing is, it's none of those, it's whatever you think it is. This one is what we call bearded badger with sombrero. And for any of you Star Wars fans, who's this look like? Yoda. Yeah, he's not green, and I know Yoda does not have a point on his head. So it's lots of fun. When we do a lot of 4th grade tours because that's when they teach Wisconsin history. And I can tell you this, when you get this room full of 4th graders, you can hardly get them out of the room. Because once you start seeing things, then there's a bear, there's an ostrich, there's a lion, and 4th graders always want to tell you what they see. Actually, that's kind of true of adults too, but all right, so that's the story of this room. This is our Supreme Court chamber. Nothing like court TV. No criminals, no handcuffs. It's an appellate court, so it only deals with cases that were already decided by a lower court and then appealed to this one, the highest court in the state. And they only take about 1 out of every 10 cases that they get appealed here. So they really focus on the ones that are the most significant issues. Now, if they were in session, you would see 7 justices sitting at what is called the bench. We're proud of the fact that in Wisconsin, 6 of the 7 are women. They're elected for 10-year terms in a public election and can be reelected. The attorneys for the case would be sitting here. Every case in here lasts only 1 hour. That's all they get. They make their arguments, the justices ask questions. These people file out and the next case comes in. So they go through it pretty fast, and then when they're not meeting in here, then they're in the back room or in the conference room deliberating cases, voting, researching, and deciding on the next case. So that's kind of what happens in here. A little bit more about the room itself. This is all the furniture in here is original furniture, including the chairs you're sitting on. At the time of the restoration, there was new leather put on the chairs and the wood all refinished, so that's why it looks so nice. This is hand-carved mahogany that they used for this primary wood in here. The room has the most marble of any room in the Capitol building. The side, this is the German marble that I talked about earlier. This is French marble. It's called Benou, B-E-N-O-U. And the thing about that marble is it's so rare. In fact, it is gone from the earth. It is used up. It's all been used. You can't get it anymore. And that's why people often ask what's the value of this building today. That's why it's really hard to say when you've got materials you can't even replace. But the estimates are somewhere around the $2 billion mark. Right in front of those columns, you see some tops of some chairs. Those are the original justice chairs. But we found some that are a little bit more comfortable for them to use during their deliberations. So that's what you see up at the front. Well, last thing about the art in here. The artist was Albert Herder. He was he came up with the idea of doing 4 murals that represented the progression of law in the world. So in the back is a trial of ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. To the upper left is the signing of the Magna Carta some 900 years ago in England. Now, the question we always get asked about that painting is, a boy and a dog at the signing of the Magna Carta, really? It seems a little odd, but we don't really know for sure. However, what we do know is if there was a boy there, it was not that boy, because that boy is the son of the painter. That's Christian Herder, Albert Herder's son. Christian Herder ended up growing up and going into politics. He was at one time the governor of Massachusetts and the last Secretary of State for President Dwight Eisenhower. Front is the signing of the Constitution in 1787. Of course, George Washington there, Ben Franklin here. This is James Madison, for whom the city was named, Alexander Hamilton, and Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson actually should not even be in this painting, because he was not at this event. He did help contribute to the Constitution, but when it actually got signed, which is this event, he was over in France being an ambassador. So he shouldn't even be here, but he certainly was an important guy at the time, and important in history. Over here is the trial of Chief Oshkosh. This is Chief Oshkosh. He was the leader of the Menominee tribe in 1830. He killed a Pawnee warrior who had killed a Menominee warrior. He was found guilty of murder by law of the territory, but then federal Judge Doty overturned the verdict because, according to law of the tribe, that was considered justified killing. Meaning, if you kill one of mine, I get to kill one of yours. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And so he determined that in this case, tribal law should take precedence. So that's the story of the Supreme Court chamber. So you are now in the Senate chamber in Wisconsin. The legislature consists of 2 bodies, like most states, the Senate and the other one we call the Assembly, which most states call the House of Representatives. Of course, they're both in the business of making laws, but they operate a little bit differently. There's some differences. So one of the big differences is size. There are 33 senators in here. They're seated by party, how many there are elected to the group, and how many desks there are in the front row and the back row. They are elected for 4-year terms. They're pretty formal in here. They are not allowed to speak, for example, unless they are wearing if they're not wearing their suit coat, they can't speak. When they want to speak, they raise their hand. They're called upon by the Senate President, who sits at the highest desk behind me, who is elected by the group. And when their microphone is turned on, then that little red button that you see on the desk lights up. Unlike what I tell the 4th graders, that it's an ejection button, although that seems to make them want to push it even more. Their voting is old-fashioned voice voting. For almost all their votes are voice votes. So they'll debate something at the end. They'll say all in favor say aye, all opposed say nay. See which side won. If they can't tell, they'll do a roll call. Well, they'll go around and ask each one of the 33 how they voted. Now the room itself, of course, the round room you're seeing here. Notice that, of course, that gives you a round skylight. Halfway up the side wall, you see the black railing, wrought iron railing. That is the gallery, and that's where the public sits. So if you came, you could come. They meet about 25 to 50 days a year for all-day sessions, and the public can come in and sit there for 2 minutes, or they can sit all day if they want to watch what's going on. But the proceedings are also televised as well, so you can stay home and watch it on your computer if you want. The stone in the room mostly is Italian marble. However, notice these big columns here. Those are French marble. The thing about those is that they're solid and they're seamless. So those came over here in one piece, just like that. So imagine that when you think you feel sorry for yourself with shipping at holiday time. Imagine that shipping challenge. Last thing I want to mention, well, first I should mention that the desks are all original, the chairs are not. This is African walnut, the wood in here, and the table on the front part here. Last, the painting. The painting is a little bit of an unusual topic for a legislative chamber. It's by Kenyon Cox, who's the one who did the mosaics out in the rotunda. It's called The Marriage of the Atlantic and the Pacific. And this room opened about the same time that the Panama Canal opened. Now that's, of course, when they built the waterway through the Central American country of Panama that basically kind of like married the Atlantic and the Pacific for shipping purposes. So they're comparing that marriage to a wedding going on here in which the groom is representing the Atlantic, welcoming the Atlantic nations like England, France, and Germany are being welcomed to the wedding by the goddess of peace. The bride, representing Pacific, the nations of the Pacific, like Japan, China, Malaysia, Polynesian islands, are being welcomed by the god of commerce. Conducting the ceremony, a red-headed woman, who in this case is not Wisconsin, but is America. And then right at the bottom of the middle frame, you see the young children representing the United States, simply because we always will be one of the youngest countries of the world, so we're shown on there as children. So that's the story of this room. Now, the building had electricity from the very beginning, even though it was very sad that the previous Capitol burned down. We probably got some benefit out of that.
From when it was smart.
Right, so this is the largest room in the Capitol. It's the largest room because the most people meet in here. There are 99 members of the Assembly. So again, compare that to the Senate, 33 in the Senate. So in Wisconsin, each Senate district consists of 3 Assembly districts. They're seated in here by party, the center aisle being the divider based on the number elected to the group from a party and the number of desks available. They tend to be a little less formal than the Senate. If you look at the desks, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner 4 buttons. The lower right-hand button is speak. So when they want to speak as part of the debate, the Senate system of waving the hands would not work with 99 people. So they use that system there, and then they electronically are recorded, speak in order that way. But even more importantly are the red and the green buttons at the top of that. They do hold some voice votes like the Senate in here, but a lot of their votes, when they want people to be on the record, then they'll be required to push the red and the green button at the top. So of course green for yes and red for no. As soon as they push the button, then a red or green light shows up right next to their last names on these boards up here. The one on your left is alphabetical by last name, the one on the right numerical by district number. So there's no secrets in here. It's all out in the open, how they voted and when they voted and who voted. Some similarities to the Senate chamber, even though it's bigger, you've got, of course, the skylight in here, the biggest one. In this one, you can actually see some shadows of some beams over top, which help answer the question that some groups have about how the skylights are protected. There's kind of like a glass structure on the top of it to stop, the hail and the snow and whatever, to protect those skylights. The railing, again, like the Senate, is called the gallery, and that's where the public sits for the meetings. A little bit more space in here because the attendance is a little bit bigger typically for this group. Most of the stone in here is Italian stone. The furniture, all refinished at the time of the renovation. This is Wisconsin oak, so this is our own Wisconsin wood. Now there are 2 features. I should mention that the leader of this group is the Speaker of the Assembly. And so that's the person that sits up there, although very frequently the Speaker of the Assembly will appoint a Speaker pro tem who will run the meeting in that person's place, so that speaker can actually come down and sit in a desk and kind of participate like the other members. 2 features of this room that are a little bit unusual for a legislative body. You probably noticed you're being looked at by a bird. That's Old Abe. Here's his story. During the Civil War, the fighting regiment from the city of Eau Claire had a pet bald eagle that they named Old Abe after President Lincoln. When they went into battle with the enemy, Old Abe led the battle, and then he would go over the enemy and he would swoop and dive and swirl and spit and caw and drop feathers and who knows what else he dropped. Be very annoying. That was the point. They hated that bird. They called him the Yankee buzzard. They shot at him, never got him. He flew in 42 battles in the war, came back perfectly healthy at the end of the war to Eau Claire. He was such a war hero for people in Wisconsin that Eau Claire gave him to the governor. The governor had a big cage built for him in the basement of the state capitol. And old Abe lived comfortably in the basement of the state capitol for 19 years. They would bring him out for parades and picnics, and he'd go on tours of the state. He was tremendously well-known and popular. In fact, not even just Wisconsin. P.T. Barnum at one time offered us $20,000 for him. We did not sell. Now, sadly, in 1881, there was a little fire of some oily rags in the basement. Old Abe sniffed the fumes, and he died. People were so upset in Wisconsin, they just lost their war hero, that the governor stuffed him and put him up in the Capitol so he could kind of like live forever. However, if you're following the timeline here, that would have been the second Madison Capitol. And you remember what happened to that one in 1904. So in 1904, the stuffed version of Old Abe burned up with the Capitol. Now, when this Capitol was being designed, they found a replica that looked just like Old Abe. Took him and put him right up there. So technically, not the original. We call him Old Abe Jr., but we love him just the same. He's been up there over a century and got another couple centuries in him for sure. Last thing I wanted to mention was that one of the questions that we often get asked is, do we have any ghosts in the Capitol? We have one. It relates to this painting up here. Now, this painting is called Wisconsin's Past, Present, and Future. It's by Edwin Blashfield, who's the same one who did the round one at the top of the rotunda. It's right here, red-headed woman, of course, Wisconsin, surrounded by three women representing the three bodies of water around our state. This woman is present day, pointing off in the distance to a brand new dome of a capitol being constructed, which is one you're standing in right now. Over here is conservation. It's all about the future, protecting our trees for future generations. Now, as you might guess, the ghost, of course, has to do with the past side, where you've got some explorers here, some soldiers, Native Americans, so-called blinded by the light of the future. Now, all the paintings in this building were painted in an artist studio somewhere else on strips of canvas and then brought here and mounted on a surface that was prepared for them ahead of time. In fact, you can kind of see right how there's a seam right there. That was true of this one. When this one came, the artist said, "Hey, people in Wisconsin, how do you like my painting?" And the artist said, or the people said, "We really like it. It's very interesting, and it's very colorful, and we really do like it. But we kind of wish there was a little bit more Wisconsin in it." So something was added to the painting after it got here. You see what was added? Yes, the badger. The badger on the rock, right there. What we did not know was that when they painted the badger in there, they had to paint over a soldier that was in that location. And just cover him up. As the years went by, that soldier mysteriously started to reappear. And I'm going to show you where he is. He's a little hard to find. And this right here is a dark spot, kind of a half moon thing. That's his hat. You cannot see his face because he's looking to the left behind this guy in the brown robe. Right there is a light tan spot that's his ear. This comes down the back of his head, the back of his neck, and the shoulder of his jacket goes behind the flag. Can you see him? Right there. He is our ghost. That's what we call the ghost of the assembly. So that's the story of this room. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Steve, for an excellent tour. Before you leave, head to the observation deck for some great views.
Like and subscribe to see more great Wisconsin destinations.